Okay, this is Jameson Nesbitt with the Cyber Senate, and welcome to our new webcast, The State of Cyber. I'm really pleased today to welcome Stefan Liversidge, OT subject matter expert with Fortinet, to the show, who's going to be talking to us a little bit further about zero trust access in OT. Stefan recently presented at the 10th Annual Control Systems Cybersecurity show with the Cyber Senate in London in November 2023, and Fortinet supported that show as our headline sponsor. So it's fantastic to have Stefan here today. OT is a growing concern for many in the manufacturing, engineering, transportation, and industrial control sectors, as we know. Stefan has a extensive background. He joined Fortinet in 2021 as a systems engineer and OT subject matter expert, and brings over 15 years experience in OT and cybersecurity, working across design, engineering, commissioning, and consulting disciplines. He's previously worked primarily in the systems integration and end user environments across the C&I and pharma industries, bringing insights into the challenges faced by OT owners and operators. Stefan is Fortinet NSE 7 and Global Industrial Cyber Professional certified, trained at the SANS Institute, and holds an MSc of Engineering. Welcome to the show, Stefan.
Thank you very much for having me back, Jameson.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Doing great.
Wonderful. Well, it's good to have you. And without further ado, let's kick it off. So zero trust is today's conversation. What is the status of zero trust in the control systems marketplace? We hear a lot about it. Are we seeing a lot of maturity or adoption there? What's your take on that? Have we met some manufacturers and control systems specialists at the show recently that are on the journey of zero trust, or do we have a long way to go still?
I think we still have a way to go. To a certain extent, it's seen as the latest buzzword. And maybe there's some skeptics around that, whether it's actually achievable. But really the sort of theme around my presentation was that zero trust is a journey. And it really relies on integrating a range of different security solutions together to really truly deliver on that sort of zero trust capability, really. So we are seeing organizations having zero trust as an aspiration, and understandably so when you look at the risks that we have in OT and how we're trying to mitigate those, then zero trust makes a lot of sense. But as always in OT, there's this fear around complexity. There's a fear around it impacting availability. And really, we just need to start taking steps towards that. So as I said, integration is the key to delivering that, really. So, again, it's really about encouraging not buying security solutions as a point in time sort of need, thinking more strategically around those acquisitions, really. And each time we have a need for endpoint, for network security, for network infrastructure, do think about how those could build your ZTNA and add to your ZTNA capability moving forwards.
Okay, great. You guys had quite the presence at this year's conference, and I noticed there's quite a bit of kit there on your exhibition stand as well. If a manufacturer comes to you and they say they're interested in zero trust and ask how they get started with this, what do you and your stand personnel really show them? I mean, is this defense in depth also?
Absolutely, it's defense in depth, but it goes beyond that, really, because once we start talking about, when people think about defense in depth, they think about the range of controls that they need, and they think about those in isolation. So really, zero trust is about taking that defense in depth and adding a layer of integration to that. So where you can get threat detection of one product, you can share that threat intelligence around, or you can issue controls to start to quarantine those threats. Really, that's really what we want to do. We want to decrease the time to detect and decrease the time to respond. We know that malware spreads in microseconds, so we need, we can't rely on manual procedures to be able to really adequately protect our environment. we need to be able to take those automated responses. That sounds a really scary concept for a lot of people in OT. But again, through the presentation, really, it's about leveraging constructs like the Purdue model, understanding, what the Purdue model really defines in terms of groups of assets and the type of role that they play within an OT network. So, do we want to, quarantine a controller that sits on a layer 1 in the Purdue model? No, that probably would be a step too far. In a true zero trust architecture, yes, absolutely we could. Maybe we take some steps to, put that into a sort of an emergency sort of mode where it can't communicate beyond a set of, essential communications as one example. But could we do that in, a DMZ? Could we quarantine a device in a DMZ? The chances are, yes, you could. I mean, obviously you need to do an impact assessment, and this is where leveraging zero trust and bringing in the contextual awareness that we get from tools like network visibility tools and asset visibility tools, for example, and feeding those into a zero trust approach. So in a DMZ, typically those assets wouldn't impact operation if they were quarantined. So therefore, we can go ahead and generally, place those in the quarantine. And it really addresses one of the key threats and risks that we talk to organizations about. They're really concerned about a threat actor gaining a foothold in their corporate environment and then pivoting across into OT. So obviously, inevitably, if you've got a proper DMZ, they're going to traverse through that DMZ environment. At that point, then you can prevent them from being successful in their aims by detecting and quarantining at that level. So, is it achievable? Is it relevant for OT? Absolutely. How do we get there? Really, we need to start with, from a Fortinet perspective. Really, we recommend starting with a FortiGate. I mean, the core component in the Fortinet environment of zero trust would be a FortiGate, which also serves as your ZTNA application gateway. So that is really, where the sort of core of ZTNA starts. And then really then it's about endpoint. So with FortiClient, once you can start to build that endpoint security posture checking capability into it. So you're sort of moving direct access to systems and applications behind a ZTNA proxy, and you're delivering that with contextual awareness of the user and the device that is trying to connect to that asset or that application. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be difficult. You expand on that capability from that point moving forwards. But, if you can deliver the core of zero trust through effectively two solutions, then, why wouldn't you? And even at that point, even if you've got those capabilities, you don't have to roll it out across every single application and every single system that you are accessed. You can do a phased migration. That's ultimately what we do in Fortinet ourselves. We use ZTNA within our own environment, and we take a phased approach to onboard the various different applications that we have internally as well.
Okay, thank you. Very thorough. Appreciate that. So on your presentation on the day, you kind of started off, with some areas on what is zero trust, what the classical approach is, and what is not zero trust, which I think is quite helpful. Was there any feedback from the audience that was quite significant, and do you feel that there are a lot more opportunities to really kind of almost handhold some industries a little bit further down the zero trust journey? I know when we worked with CISA here in the United States recently, they did a roundtable for us. We really wanted to sit people down with them, some manufacturers and some energy companies down with them to look at that model, and say, hey, how do you implement this?
Yeah. I mean, we do work with regulatory authorities, again, who are looking to understand and help organizations address the now. And this is where we see the requirements for, those point products. Those, I need a firewall. Yeah, the FortiGate is a next generation firewall. but this is where we work with regulatory authorities to, really expand their understanding of what the art of the possible is. So, again, it's sort of a dotted line to my presentation last year. How do we go beyond doing the basics? So, in terms of questions that came from the audience, they were of that sort of similar theme, really. Where do we start? What does that journey look like? And, fundamentally, some core components to that. But ultimately, also, it's about integration. And integration, can be achieved in a range of different ways. And the beauty that we have is we integrate within Fortinet product, but we also integrate within third parties. Now, I do know other organizations that we've spoken to that have said, yeah, we recognize this challenge to be able to deliver these capabilities that we want, like rapid threat containment, like zero trust. We need to integrate those solutions. We've got a range of different products. We've got a history of buying best of breed, and we recognize that. So what we did is we committed significant resources into building a dev team, and using that to effectively use the API calls and build the custom integration platform. That's great if you've got the resources to be able to do that. Unfortunately, many of our customers don't, and are looking for pre-built integrations, which, that platform approach is really what it buys into, that sort of Gartner cybersecurity mesh architecture approach, and really that's why they're pushing that. So, us working with regulators, us working with customers, and, other bodies like Gartner, also really promoting that approach that will help drive zero trust.
Okay. I was going to ask you how vendors could help progress zero trust, but I think you just answered that question. There's a slide on here I thought maybe we might want to address as well. I'm not going to show it on the video, but it's addressing the myths and perceived challenges of zero trust. Could you take us down that journey a little bit? What are those myths and challenges
we have, again, when we talk to customers, zero trust is that aspiration. The view that, yes, it's got to be this sort of big bang kind of approach really is what puts people off. They're going to have to re-architect the networks. They're going to have to add complexity. And, when you're dealing with teams who are already operationally constrained in terms of the cybersecurity resources they've got, that's a big sort of factor that impacts their decision. Now, again, the sort of what we try to convey in the presentation, that there doesn't have to be this scary big bang approach. You can do some of the things that you're already doing and apply zero trust concepts to it. So you deploy your firewall, you deploy some endpoint, you're already there capable of delivering zero trust. You can then just use those zero trust tags in effectively the same way that you're doing as a firewall policy. So it's not such a huge shift from what you're doing now. You're just using some additional tools to give you better context and make more granular decisions. The sort of, I've worked in organizations that have tried to achieve that same level of granularity, but using those classical approaches, using lots and lots of VLANs to create very small zones in that sort of 62443 zones conduits concept. Absolutely, you can see the reason why they do that, but also to manage and maintain that environment is incredibly resource intensive. So this is where cybersecurity, you can see why people are going down that granular segmentation approach, but also you can see why certain organizations would have challenges to that. So it doesn't necessarily, just because you're using this technology doesn't need to mean that it's more complex. It just helps you more easily achieve some of the things that a lot of organizations are striving towards anyway.
Okay, and I guess there's a perception that it relates only to remote access, only works in the cloud. I see you've listed here as well. And these are not true.
No, absolutely. One of the really, really strong use cases for ZTNA is IT accessing OT. why wouldn't you want to have, device security posture checking for IT users, checking that they've not got malware before they're accessing, maybe it is an engineering workstation or something like that, or even, using jump hosts or RDP sessions. We see this commonly when we're doing sort of hardening exercises with customers or firewall policy reviews. And obviously RDP is a massive hole, and a threat actor who discovers that would be looking to very definitely exploit that, given that we know we've got legacy issues in OT. There's a very high likelihood that would be exploitable too. So, we can use ZTNA to not only mean that we remove that direct RDP access across the firewall, because it'll be actually proxied through the ZTNA application gateway, but we can also get more granular access to who's using that RDP. So that's one really good example of an internal network use for ZTNA. Another one would be engineers, whether that is third party or whether it be engineers that are internal within the organization that may be mobile, maybe visiting a number of plants and also visiting McDonald's and Starbucks and using open Wi-Fi and various different removable media, etc. All the sort of threats that we know are present in OT, but we struggle to deal with. Well, ZTNA again can help you, determine the security status of that device. You can't guarantee at any point in time that device isn't compromised. If you can use ZTNA to give you that reassurance that it is a known, managed, clean, trusted device, again, why would you want to do that? So it's not only about remote access. Yes, remote access forms part of that. It's not only about cloud. Yes, cloud does form part of that, but there's very strong use cases for using ZTNA internally within the network.
Thank you, Stephen. There's some use cases that you've pointed out here at the conference. Would you care to go through those a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sector.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, what we're trying to achieve with Zero Trust is knowing, who is on the network, what is on the network, and granular provision and access. So, a cornerstone to ZTNA is around that, being able to identify the users. Once you can identify the users, then you can provision them with access based on their role. That's sort of fundamental. The trouble is that how that typically has been implemented, it might not involve things like single sign-on, for example, and that once you introduce MFA as part of that sort of authentication step as well, then it starts to be getting cumbersome in terms of provisioning access and granularly provisioning access. So this is again where ZTNA not only improves security but also improves the user experience, and that's really what we want, isn't it? We want to strongly authenticate the users, but also we don't want to make their lives more difficult. So it's a bit of a sort of win-win. Once we start talking about what's on the network, it's about how we profile those assets. So some of that can be, using Fortinet solutions like NAC, for example, but it also can be, again, third-party integrations as a core part of delivering a ZTNA capability. So we all know there are solutions out there that are great at passively profiling OT assets, bringing in the sort of vulnerability status of those. We can ingest that into the platform and start to make decisions based on that. Again, do we want to contain that threat? Do we want to allow remote access to those devices given the level of severity of vulnerability, etc.? So again, we can incorporate that into the platform. And then we start talking about the remote access use case. Like I said, it's not the sole part of ZTNA, but it forms a significant part. We've sort of covered that really with the sort of engineer use case internally, but if you apply that same concept externally as well, we need to make sure that we allow access from a wide variety of locations, these days. And we speak to a lot of customers that, have a lot of different OEM vendors who manage and maintain systems within their environment. So that becomes really, really complex for them. But again, we can use ZTNA not only to deliver better security, but also if they're accessing resources within the environment that could be widely distributed. And ZTNA also serves as part of that VPN replacement technology. It transparently builds the tunnels. So again, delivering better security with less inconvenience and less overhead to the operators. And then finally, that sort of really covers the sort of final use case there around, ZTNA being, a better VPN connection. We all know engineers and users don't want to have to think of, this application or this system lives on this site, so I need this VPN. And then if I want to access a different site, I've got to disconnect from that and go to another VPN. It quickly gets horrible, and VPNs, we know are widely exploited for various different reasons. Primarily the vulnerabilities on the VPN gateway itself. So ZTNA, again, better security, less inconvenience. I think, I guess I've said that a number of times, but ultimately that's really what we're trying to strive towards.
Sure. Okay. We have a few more minutes here. So just as a wrap up, Stephen, what is the value? Could you elaborate further on the Zero Trust Access value proposition as you did at the conference?
Really, as we said, we know we're all striving for, increased levels of granularity. It is because of the restrictions that we have on the kinds of tools we can use within OT, because of the restrictions on the legacy of systems and applications that we have, that's not going away anytime soon. We can guarantee that the systems that we're putting in today, are going to be managed and maintained from a security perspective in a way that would mitigate the sort of vulnerabilities that will be coming, on day 2 and day 3. And the extended life cycles that we have. So we need to have ways to shield these devices. Microsegmentation is part of that, but we need a better way to deliver microsegmentation. We need a better way rather than continuous password prompts. So we need to address, the weak and stolen passwords. We need to address the hybrid architectures that we are going to have and that we are seeing customers doing. Cloud is a very interesting topic in OT at the minute. It's not, even if just 5 years ago, it was very much cloud averse environment. Whereas now, we see customers very much embracing cloud. So how do we deliver security within that hybrid context within OT? ZTNA helps you with that, as well as the complexities of where resources live. Managing that, the growing attack surface that we all know is there. How do we deal with that? Maybe using tools like NAC to do that granular network provisioning, automate some of those tasks, and be able to respond to threats in real time is key. Again, IoT threat against an IoT device, that could allow a threat actor a foothold in your network. Well, you can use ZTNA to be able to detect that and quarantine that. Again, losing an IoT device, not always, but often, would just be an inconvenience rather than a fundamental production outage. That's what we're trying to avoid, ultimately. And then sort of, visibility and control of who's connecting, when they're connecting, how they're connecting, what they're connecting from, what they're connecting to. These are all of those are issues that are omnipresent and have been in OT security since the dawn of time. People have just struggled to deal with it. Well, the ZTNA approach would fundamentally help address those issues.
Thank you, Stefan. Just before we end here, what does the day in life of a OT subject matter expert look like for you?
Busy. No, the fun thing of the job is the variety. So, getting involved in sort of thought leadership things, such as this, getting involved with customers on, not only addressing what they need now, but road mapping, what the future could look like for them. Because again, that's really, I'm really quite passionate about that. Really, point in time, addressing security concerns as a point in time exercise. You're just going to be constantly drinking from the fire hose. You need to think more strategically than that. So we get involved in a lot of that, as well as some of the sort of more mundane stuff around, firewall sizing and does the firewall meet XYZ requirements, etc. And then labbing, things up, currently building out, some wider sort of Fortinet fabric labs to articulate things like this. What does zero trust look like in an OT environment, and doing that in a context of actually utilizing industrial platforms such as controllers by the likes of Siemens Rockwell and SCADA and engineering stations that in a similar vein, Siemens Rockwell's, Honeywell's, etc. So it just allows us to help customers show that this technology is relevant for their environment, and actually being able to demonstrate it is very useful for them, really, to see that it is an applicable, appropriate technology.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Stefan Liversidge, an OT subject matter expert with Fortinet, joining us today, talking a little bit more about Zero Trust. And we thank you for your time and your service to keeping the lights on for the rest of society, Stefan.
Thanks a lot, Jameson. Great as always.
Appreciate it. Take care.